Hello YouTube, this is Let's Talk Horror and welcome back to another video. Okay guys, so I am back. I know I have not uploaded in a long time. I'm very sorry about that. I do owe you an explanation. It has been a while, and so I am going to give you an explanation. Simply put, over the past year, I've had technical difficulties with my computer. It kind of crashed on me, the battery kind of crashed on me, and it took me a while to get my hands on a new one and get those technical difficulties resolved. So sadly, I've not been able to do YouTube in a long time, but I'm back, and I'm so happy to be back, and hopefully I will be able to do this more consistently and give you guys content once again. So there's my explanation, and I felt it was the right time to jump back on here because we got some big news on Friday, last Friday, when Bloody Disgusting dropped the huge news that there is officially a Friday the 13th reboot in place. I have the article up in front of me right now. Let me get it up and let me read some of the quotes for you from this article. This comes from Brad Miska over at Bloody Disgusting. Again, very credible source if you have not heard of them. And honestly, I don't think there are a lot of horror fans who haven't heard of Bloody Disgusting in some way, shape, or form. I highly recommend you use them as a source. They are very credible. But to start the article, here's what it says, quote unquote, Bloody Disgusting has uncovered a big-time scoop to finish off the week, learning that Sean S. Cunningham is not only working to get his own Friday the 13th reboot off the ground, but he's also developing a reboot of a horror movie he produced back in 1985, House. In addition, Cunningham is producing an original film titled The Night Driver, working alongside writer Jeff Locker and director Jeremy Weiss on the various upcoming projects. Locker explains, Sean hired me to do a rewrite on The Night Driver, and after working closely with director Jeremy Weiss and him on that, we naturally got to talking about Friday the 13th and House. Jeremy and I pitched our dream reboot of Friday the 13th with Sean's blessing to keep developing it with him. Locker continues, obviously the prequel TV series has reignited interest about a new film, so we're hoping the surrounding excitement will inspire both sides to come together and give us Jason on the big screen again for the first time in 14 years. But we also have a plan B for a sequel to the original we think fans will absolutely love and should avoid any legal entanglements. Okay, so let's start with the Friday the 13th part of this. That is obviously the big quote that everyone is talking about, that they're hoping the surrounding excitement will inspire both sides to come together and give us Jason on the big screen again for the first time in 14 years. But we also have a plan B for a sequel to the original we think fans will absolutely love and should avoid any legal entanglements. I've never heard of these writers before. These are completely unknown writers. This writer and director duo is completely unknown to me. But, okay. I want to urge caution here. I want to urge patience because, guys, as horror fans and as Friday the 13th fans, we have been here before with this. Shortly after the 2009 reboot came out, it was rumored that they were moving ahead with the sequel that was supposed to come out in 2010 or 2011, and we since know that the creators behind the 2009 Friday the 13th reboot wanted to make a sequel of some kind, and I believe it was supposed to have Jason in the snow like we all want, and it was supposed to be in 3D. That obviously never happened. And then the rights went to Paramount, if you remember correctly. David Bruckner was attached, and there were some rumors about a found footage film. Never happened. And then I believe his name is Nick Antosca wrote a script about a Friday the 13th film that was actually set in the 1980s, so kind of ahead of its time in that way. That was in development, never happened. And then we finally had one at Paramount. Paramount had like 5 or 6 years to get this off the ground, and it was supposed to be kind of like what the Peacock series was supposed to be, with Elias Voorhees and Pamela Voorhees, and kind of a Jason origin story, if you will. And that never happened. So we've had multiple Friday the 13th projects in production that just have never come to fruition. So really, for me as a horror fan, and I think for a lot of Friday the 13th fans, judging from the reaction I've seen to this article, people aren't really going to get excited about this until they are actually on location, on set, filming this movie. And I understand that. because we've been burned by this franchise one too many times. We've gotten our hopes up one too many times, and I totally get it. With that said, I do like that it's official, that they officially announced a reboot. I do like that. I know there was some speculation after Sean Cunningham's cameo description last year changed to hint that there was a reboot coming. But now it's official. Now there's apparently a Sean S. Cunningham produced Friday the 13th movie in production. And I also like how they note that, hey, we're hoping both sides can come together. We're hoping the surrounding excitement can bring both sides together, and maybe we can come up with a deal to get Jason back to the big screen. And I also think it's telling that they have a plan B. That there's at least some optimism that maybe Victor Miller and Sean S. Cunningham can put their differences aside and actually give us a Friday the 13th movie with Jason, with all the rights in place. And if they can't, them mentioning that they have a plan B of a direct sequel to the original that should avoid any legal entanglements, this is the closest we've been in a while to a legitimate Friday the 13th film, to the 13th Friday the 13th film in the franchise being made, and that's great news. And the mention of a plan B makes me believe that this is legitimately happening. Still, we're going to remain cautious, as I always do. The early indication to me is we have a lot to be optimistic about, and that's great. That's great. And it's a great time to be a slasher fan. Like, you could make the argument that slasher movies, the most relevant they've been since the 1980s. I mean, we just got done with what I thought was a great trilogy in the Halloween franchise. Still have mixed feelings about Halloween Ends. Maybe I'll get into that in a separate video. But in my personal opinion, the David Gordon Green Haddonfield timeline, as it's being called in the Halloween franchise, is my favorite timeline. I know that's going to be very controversial for some of you, but it's how I feel. We just had a great Scream 5 come out last year, and now Friday the 13th is finally coming back. It seems no matter what, we are at the very least getting the Peacock series, and they have the full rights to that. Brian Fuller and his crew have the full rights to do whatever they want with that series, and apparently the writing process on the first season is expected to start either this week or next week, so super excited for that. And now it sounds like we've been the closest we have been in a while to the 13th Friday the 13th. It's cautious optimism. Again, you can't get truly excited as a horror fan until they, are actually in full production and filming this thing, but there's definitely cautious optimism as far as this goes. One more thing I wanted to mention. As far as what I would want to see, I've actually heard some people say, I almost hope they don't come to a deal or an agreement because I want to see, a sequel to the original and not a reboot. I don't know if I agree with that. For one, the 2009 reboot is kind of a direct sequel to the original, so you kind of already have that movie to begin with in some ways. But also, I'm just afraid with the whole direct sequel to the original thing, is it just going to feel like, to a certain extent, what Texas Chainsaw Massacre felt like, in that it just felt like in some ways it was ripping off Halloween 2018. And if they have a plan for a direct sequel to the original, I hope it just doesn't feel like a Halloween 2018 ripoff. And I hope it's something unique and something different and they go in a different direction. Okay, but now let's move on to the other aspect of this. That wraps up the Friday the 13th aspect of this. Let's move on to the House reboot. Now, I wanted to talk about this because this movie honestly has a special place in my heart. I grew up with this movie. I watched this movie a ton as a kid. I'm referring to House from 1986, starring William Katt and George Wendt. William Katt was in The Greatest American Hero, and he plays Roger Cobb in this movie. And George Wendt, obviously from Cheers, as Norm Peterson. I've grown up and I've loved that show. He plays his comedic next-door neighbor. And if you don't know what House is, obviously I'm not talking about the medical show. I'm talking about House. It's essentially a cheesy but charming 80s B-movie horror comedy about a haunted house and a guy moving into a haunted house, a writer moving into a haunted house. And I loved this movie as a kid. I watched it a ton. The scene that would always get to me would be when Roger Cobb's wife, or supposed wife, comes over to check on him. A bullet rolls on the floor off of a table. She bends over to pick it up, and when she stands back up, she's this gremlin or this ghoul, or I think on the Wikipedia page describing this monster, it was referred to as the zombie witch, and that scene always stuck with me and terrified me as a kid. Now, obviously, watching it for the first time in years, a year or two ago, I can really appreciate it for what it is, the horror comedy sense to it and the kind of B-movie sense to it, and it is that. And before anyone gets offended at that B-movie term, because I know not everyone likes that, some of the most beloved horror movies of all time are B-movie horror movies. I mean, let's talk about Killer Clowns from Outer Space, for example. Decades later, that movie is still beloved by millions of horror fans. And decades later, people are still begging for that movie to get a sequel. And decades later, people are amped up for the new video game, and I am too. So just because something can be described as a B movie doesn't make it bad or doesn't mean it can't be beloved. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. So anyway, let's get into the House aspect of this Bloody Disgusting article. As for the House reboot, check out some of the early artwork below. Locker explains that the plan is to reimagine the 1985 movie. There's also an accompanying video game concept. The House reboot is both an update and reimagining of the classic series, centering around the birth of a haunted house. Locker explains. Lots of great scares and howl at the screen laughs. Plus, we're bringing back a few of your favorite monsters from the original for some really fun but equally terrifying kills. I'm working on the script as we speak, and all I can say is I'm having a effing blast. I can't actually say that word. I've heard YouTube is really cracking down on cuss words, so you know what the F word is. But okay, the big thing to me, the big thing that obviously excites me as someone who has a ton of nostalgia for this movie, is the fact that the original monsters are coming back. Now, I was really amped when I heard that. Now, I am worried that to bring back those monsters, they're going to overuse CGI. After sitting down and thinking about it, that really does scare me. But obviously, I'm hoping the zombie witch is back. I'm hoping the closet monster is back. I would love to see the Marlin come back. A lot of memorable monsters in that movie. And yeah, if you haven't seen House, check it out. And in fact, if you haven't seen House, I'd be curious to know what you think if you watch it. Can you sit down and enjoy it for what it is, the same way that people who have a lot of nostalgia, who grew up with that movie, can and still sit back and watch and enjoy it? But yeah, super excited. Love the reimagining concept. Love that they're sticking with kind of the B-movie horror comedy type of thing, and especially love that they're bringing back the original monsters. That's really all we know about it for now. Which monsters do you want to see come back? I'm at least hoping the zombie witch comes back, what the wife turns into, and then that closet monster, and maybe even the main antagonist that gets revealed at the end of the movie. I'm trying to avoid saying who that is because I don't want to spoil it for anyone. But yeah, super excited for this. I know they do provide a poster, as they say. They do provide a poster for House. And the one notable thing is on the poster, and I'll probably show it in the video, they do put 2024. So they don't give you a release date, but they do put 2024. So they must be far along in the script enough to where they think they can get this out probably mid to late next year. But the rest of the poster, it's very similar to the opening, but this one, it's not great. It's not great. It looks very cheap. It looks very fan-made. It could definitely look a lot better. Not to criticize, but I'm hoping this isn't the main poster. I'm hoping they just wanted to get something out there for the fans, because this could be a lot better. Because when I saw this poster, I have to admit, I cringed. I was as excited about House as I am, but I know I'm not the only one who saw that as a kid, and has a lot of nostalgic memories of watching that. So I'm definitely excited to see what they bring. I'm definitely excited to see if they can make that type of horror comedy and bring it in the modern day. I'm definitely excited to see what original monsters they bring back. Oh, and also I wanted to mention, they apparently have a video game concept that they are pitching to try to get off the ground. What do you think the video game concept could be, guys, for a house video game? I don't know, man. I really don't know what that would even look like. The only thing I can really think of is maybe it's like a Layers of Fear type of thing. You know, if you've played that, you know what I'm talking about. Maybe they can make a horror comedy version of that game. But man, I'm honestly really curious to see what they have in mind as far as a video game concept for a house video game goes. I'd love to hear more on that. Who knows if that even gets off the ground, though. I guess hopefully we'll find out more information. But yeah, I guess technically 3 projects if you include the video game that I'm very excited for. And it's good to be back, guys. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. Leave your comments below on House, on Friday the 13th, on the House video game, on anything I discussed in today's video. And give this video a thumbs up. Comment and subscribe, and I will talk to you guys later. Take care.